Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jerry. It's really good to be here. We've learned so much from Sociocracy for All over the years, and it's a real treat to be able to give back and to share our stories of what we're learning. We were invited to keep this session and showcase to be largely informal, and so I'm going to facilitate a conversation between myself and my colleagues, Amy and Boris. My name is Lauren Greenspan, and I've been with CPA for 5.5 years. I started as the second employee, and now I have the privilege to lead our people and culture efforts for a team of almost 12, soon to be 12 full-time staff people. Amy, Boris, would you like to say more about your role in CPA?
Yeah, good afternoon, or whatever time zone you're joining us here. Boris Sigal from the Community Purchasing Alliance. I'm one of our co-executive directors, and I've been with the co-op here going on 5 years. And a big part of my focus now is just thinking about how we grow as a cooperative, how we can take a model in DC and help communities in other parts of the country replicate a similar kind of cooperative, and how we do it in a very intentional way. And Sociocracy has been a real guide for us, so pleasure to be here for this conversation. Amy?
Hey all, yep, I'm Amy Abbott. I am the other co-executive director here at CPA Co-op. I have been with CPA since 2018, and my path kind of leading me to the co-op was rooted in community organizing. So I'm a former community organizer. I like to say that I used to organize people around social issues, and now we help organize money and how our institutions that are the member owners of the co-op, how they use that money to change their communities for the better. And great to be here with you all.
So you may have noticed the title, we titled our presentation Sociocracy and the Solidarity Economy. Wanted to provide a quick definition and also hear from, and just stop the share and hear from the people in this room, if you're familiar with that, the language of the solidarity economy, if that's what drew you to the presentation and how you might define it. So I went off screen, the screen so that I could see. But if anyone would like to go off mute and share their definition of the solidarity economy, or if what drew you to this talk today.
Just want to say I know nothing.
Great.
If I can, I know many experience, many projects that do it, and I'm studying and going busy projects that are applying it to learn it and share with other community that we are trying to support to get to that point. So really interested. Thank you.
Hi, Lauren.
Christine.
Yes, I was drawn by the title of Solidarity Economy. I'm calling in from Toronto, Canada. I co-founded an organization called Freedom Dreams Cooperative Education, and it's supporting the development of BIPOC-led co-ops. And so I came to Sociocracy very interested in how sociocratic principles can aid co-ops in consensus decision making. So I'm very happy to see a co-op, sharing their experience.
That's great.
Well, I can just say I'm here. I like to think of sociocracy as the potential governance and decision-making system of the new economy, of the solidarity economy. Why would we do anything different? And what solidarity economy means to me is sort of economics as if people matter. How are we making our decisions, economic and life decisions, so that everyone's benefit rather than some? So it has a lot to do with ownership and control, being in the hands of all, or the people who are joined together in particular projects, rather than being extractive.
Mm-hmm.
I could go, I think it's also about reclaiming resources as something that you have to pour back into and not just extract and see as something that you could just overuse, so that we create abundance by opening up for more possibility, like meeting needs would also make it possible for more people to contribute.
I thought of one other phrase, which is just about the shifting, shifting the current, extreme inequality. So it's about those of us who have more resources figuring out how to keep moving it towards the people who have less, so that we are in a more sustainable, regenerative, blah, 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 egalitarian kind of world society.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing your insights and your interest with us around this topic. And I wanted to follow kind of some of the principles within the solidarity economy of not being a sage on the stage and assume that I know everything and I'm going to teach you about the solidarity economy, but understand the wealth of information that's available here in the collective. And I really see the solidarity economy asking and challenge, what do we have in common? How do we hold our common self-interest together? And it allows us to reimagine what leadership looks like and who gets to be around the table, who gets to have a voice. It's governed and controlled by everyday people, and it's truly rooted in cooperative values. And on that, I'll pass it over to Amy to share more.
Sure. Hey, everyone. Again, Lauren kind of said it, and I'm going to say it in a slightly different way. Whenever we're in a spaces like this, we kind of have this giant sigh of relief that, like, these are our people. Like, listening to all of you describe why you came today, like, it gives me that same sense of, like, yes, you are our kind of people. So, inside the cooperative movement, we definitely aspire to hold these cooperative values. And we think that, sociocracy fits into the cooperative principles and cooperative values nicely, and that, one worker, one vote, the spirit of cooperation and collaboration amongst cooperatives. And, that's, I think, was a natural fit for us to evolve into a modified sociocracy that we're practicing currently. So who are we? What is CPA Co-op? I'm excited to announce that we have just gone through a staff and board alignment, and we have a new mission statement. So I'm going to read it to you. I haven't memorized it yet, but I want to read it to you. Okay. We are a cooperative that builds group purchasing power to strengthen local institutions and the communities they serve. What does that actually mean? We have a mission that's twofold. So we want to strengthen community institutions using this collective process of power building, of group purchasing. But our second mission is to help align those institutions with their purchasing. So we focus on shifting spend to BIPOC-owned, woman-owned, and locally owned businesses. Again, I mentioned that I'm at the co-op because I want to build power, and I understand that money is a form of power that most of our institutions have a lot of. And so how are they utilizing that power and then using it to collectively build with our other community institutions to do better with that money that they have? We have some stats up here that, we're particularly proud of. I'll say that during the pandemic, we were a little bit concerned, talking about what happens if we need to do layoffs or, if we would need to downsize or we would need to decrease, pay. So we feel really lucky that instead it's been a story of triumph, and that we grew 47% year over year in 2021. And that, we've been able to have a larger impact. As Boris mentioned, we're now trying to expand beyond the DC region.
Thanks, Amy.
Sure.
Yes, so let's There's a couple of different levels to think about CPA, or at least in my mind. I think there's at the root of our co-op, we are following in a long tradition of purchasing cooperatives. So it's a set of institutions that have common needs and challenges. In our case, we work with community institutions, schools, congregations, housing centers, retirement communities. Those are that are really rooted or anchored in a community. And we help facilitate practical collaborations from, hey, what do we do with our energy contracts during a really wild period of energy markets, to we're getting gouged on our waste hauling and we're getting missed pickups. At this point, 14 and growing number of purchasing areas that really start with a concrete need, and asking who else has this need and what does it mean for us to cooperate. And so by bringing more and more institutions around a common need, we're building group purchasing power. And that group purchasing power is, yes, allowing us to get better rates, right? We're coming to the marketplace with more power. It allows us to get better contracts and really leaning on each other's stories and understanding of what goes right and what goes wrong, building contracts that are responsive to what's actually happening. And it leads to better decision making. We're learning from peers about how each of us thinks about decisions that are, more complicated than what kind of, printer paper we're getting. This can affect the life and blood of the organizations, the kind of buildings we're building, how we're maintaining them, how we're making business decisions. So creating a space where we're making better decisions together. Through that, the co-op facilitates about $20 million of purchasing, and we take about a 5% rebate or co-op fee to sustain our operation. And so it's a model that's returning a lot of savings and time and money back to institutions, but also creating, a business engine that sustains and grows the operation. I think another level to think about is just the social enterprise side of it, which is, thinking about that each transaction, and particularly the institutions we're working with, are rooted in a community and are thinking about not just their own well-being, but the well-being of the surrounding community, and also just themselves as a global citizen. Each purchase is an opportunity to ask, how is the decision we're making aligned with our values? So there are ways to lean into, better environmental practices, better labor practices, racial equity, and thinking about the businesses we're lifting up and not lifting up. And then, the previous slide, we think about a little bit also about us as a cooperative, thinking about not just the outcome of our work, but the process by which we do the work, that the kinds of relationships, the way we are, the way that we are bringing people into decision making and into power. What are we leaving behind with this work? And besides the outcome, what kind of capacity are we leaving behind to be able to organize and to increasingly to act on more and more important issues. And Lauren, you want to lift up some of the examples here of what it looks like for CPA to act as a social enterprise?
Yes. So I want to tell a story of LGC security. When I started the co-op in 2016, we were just beginning to explore security maintenance, and we had started a group of charter schools, a peer network to, and that was an issue that they were raising, that the guards that they were bringing in were from national firms, that they didn't know the school, didn't know the community. And Travion Smith, the man who owns LGC, he had grown up in Ward 8 of DC, knew the community really well. And we had, through this group purchasing, had the opportunity to introduce him to our network, and he's since grown well beyond 100 employees. Actually, I've been outside of the security program for a while, but I do know that I was a part of meeting. I had a chance to walk around with him, and they were going beyond working in charter schools, where they were doing security for large events. And Boris, am I right? Was he working on some of the inauguration security as well?
Yeah, he was. I mean, I think this is an example of a business that started, with a few part-time employees, and was able to get connected to a few contracts that allowed him and his team to grow, and then, you know, grow to a point where, you know, the contracts he's getting from large stadiums to large events are now, you know, bigger than even some of our largest member institutions. So the co-op playing, you know, I think a really important part of a business development ecosystem by providing opportunities to the right contracts at the right time.
Yeah, if we think about the pipeline of capacity building, our mid-sized institutions are, you know, part of growing a business to be able to have the capacity to serve larger institutions like universities or stadiums or those sorts of things, like having the opportunity to work in our network for a few years. There's really ample opportunities to grow. And I apologize that I have two monitors and I haven't quite figured out how to move where I can look there. Anything else on this slide, Amy or Boris, that you'd want to lift up? I'll move to, so thinking about how we do facilitate processes externally. We began as a team, especially as we were going to think more critically about, well, how are we doing this internally? How can we match the work that we're doing with our schools and our congregations to balance questions of good facilitation, drawing people out, what are the pain points, and deep listening to try to understand where people are, and most importantly, like, how do we make decisions together, which is, you know, clearly where sociocracy has become such a huge tool for us. And Amy, would you speak to just how we got started with some of this shared leadership work?
Sure. So, you know, when we were asked to present, a big piece of the presentation in the showcase is really about how did we get here? You know, where did we come from? What are some of the steps that we took? And knowing that can't happen overnight, you know, how did we get here? And so we wanted to give you sort of a couple of stories that illustrate our progress and our movement towards sociocracy. So in 2018, you know, the co-op underwent a large sort of self-reflection and an acknowledgement that we were not paying people equitably on the team. We wanted to do a full compensation review for every staff person on the team. It was our first step towards a shared leadership structure where an HR committee was formed to hire an outside consultant to lead us through a compensation practice to then make a recommendation to the organization. And so I'm so incredibly proud, and everyone who was part of the team at that time, there were 5 of us, we said this was some of the most impactful work that any of us had done in our careers, because we were like little fish swimming up against, you know, a society that pays women and people of color less, that, you know, leads to decades and decades of lost income for people. And we were, you know, trying to figure out, how do we make sure that we're not complicit and we're not a part of that system. So that process has led us to the creation of this compensation equity matrix that we try to remove as much bias from the hiring and salary conversation as possible. We accept that it's not perfect and that it's ever changing, but we were so excited that not only did we increase, you know, the women's salaries on our team, but actually everyone in the organization made more money. So we found that by having a transparent process, by being committed to not lowering anyone's salary, we actually were able to offer more competitive salaries to everyone on the team. We also decided that as part of this process, we wanted to have a wage ratio. That meant we didn't, you know, want to ever go above a 2.5 to 1 ratio. And in practice, we're more at like 1.6. So the highest earner of our organization, you know, makes 1.6 to 1. And so we found that's another way sort of in this, the compensation practice, a way that we are able to really value people's work and to have this flatter organizational structure.
And a lot of this began in 2018, and we were using language of shared leadership. And that worked pretty well for a team of 5 people. We brought in a consultant who helped us with that process. She talked about what are plenary worthy discussions, and we were able to navigate some of those questions together. But one story that really highlighted the need for something different was a 2019 hiring process that we had through the summer. So there was a team of 3 of us that, the grueling work of, getting a hiring process up off the ground and running and trying to communicate very clearly with candidates. And we get to the final round and we realized that we really couldn't find consensus on the next step to move forward. This was fall of 2019. And we ultimately didn't end up making a hire at that point. And that's when it really was like, okay, we need something else. We need some other way of approaching these questions. And in 2020, Amy and I had an opportunity to meet with Ted Rao. And after that conversation, I read your book, Jerry, with Ted, Many Voices, One Song. And we just began to slowly implement pieces of, it wasn't a total overhaul by any means, but just slowly began to implement some of the thinking and the logic, specifically around shifting language. And we're going to say more about this later in the presentation, but shifting the language away from consensus, that we're all on the same page, to consent, that this is safe enough to try, and this is within our range of tolerance, and we can move forward together. And so in 2020, our team is expanded now to 8 people, and we're moving away from this language of distributed leadership or shared leadership, like we're all going to come together and figure it out, to we're going to distribute power and the domains of that power into circles and understand how that flows and interacts in the organization. And Boris is going to say more about where we are today with that.
Yeah, and I don't want to understate, and Lauren isn't one to take credit, but I think it's hard to understate how critical it was for us to find the right language and shared mental model for the things we were trying to do informally inside of the organization, but we're locked into an old paradigm and into more traditional ways of thinking about how to structure organization, and even the words we were using to try to describe decision-making and authority and power and accountability. And Lauren really it was a breath of air into our organization, and being able to adapt some of the concepts and constructs from sociocracy and to really start restructuring ourselves in this way. And thanks to Lauren's leadership, I think demonstrating how sociocracy can actually, create really incredible action inside of an organization. That's really transformative. Where we are now as an organization is really, I think, using sociocracy to guide as a guide is exploration of how to really restructure our organization again. We're in this really exciting but challenging stretch where we're trying to take an organization that is rooted in one place. We are a member-owned cooperative. We've got about 80 institutions that are member owners of CPA in DC, and are now starting to see similar co-ops emerge in other parts of the country. So take it to an organization that's helping start up similar kind of cooperatives in new regions, and to provide connection and centralization and more efficiency and power across a network of similar co-ops. And so it's forcing us to really rethink about what roles and what functions and what people are located where. But it's also really multiplying the stakeholders we're working with. And so we are trying to see how sociocracy can position us to really have a really structured and well-designed way where a growing set of stakeholders that really are affected by this work, community institutions in new regions, the leaders that represent those institutions, the staff that are on the ground organizing, you know, the funders and advisors that are helping seed new cooperatives, you know, just the number of stakeholders implement that are tied up in the future success of the co-op is multiplying. And so, you know, the big challenge for us, and we've already this year reorganized ourselves to set up for a more long-term structure, is to think about how do circles and their linking and the participation, the routines and the policies that we follow allow us to really, you know, grow from one cooperative to many and to maintain kind of cohesion and connection through it. So I think that's kind of the central challenge we're sitting with today as a co-op. And so you can see, you know, we are now starting to set up circles that are starting to mimic. We haven't fully reorganized our organization around more of a network and federated space, but internally we're set up circle spaces that are going to essentially, you know, break off potentially into separate organizations, but certainly separate teams. And so we have, you know, one that's holding our legacy work in DC, and another one that's really starting to incubate a network that's supporting new cooperatives and really connecting them so we can have more power across regions than any one region can have on their own. And so this is, you know, an interim org chart showing how we're set up today. And we're finding that that's also kind of creating the room for us to grow in the direction we're trying to go.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Boris. So we were discussing yesterday, like what to pull out from what we're learning, and these are three big highlights. So Amy, you're going to take the first one for us.
Yeah, so I mentioned before that I come to this work as a former community organizer, and so we talk a lot about self-interest. And the really beautiful thing, if you can align your self-interest with the needs of your organization, that's like the sweet spot. That's where we want people to fall. And so I think we have a couple different mechanisms that allow people to pursue their self-interest through the co-op. And the first one is that we think about position descriptions in this breakdown of like 70%, 30%. So 70% is really the like critical role that you're fulfilling for the co-op. And then the 30%, you know, can be for additional pursuits that might be outside of that 70%. And I'll just give the example of our brilliant colleague, Lauren, who's the head of our people and culture, but she also is a very talented video creator and editor. And so that's kind of nestled in her 30%. The other mechanism is that we also see an opportunity for, you know, current employees to find different bodies of work that they're interested in leading and owning for the co-op. So we have found that, you know, the people who are closest to the work are the ones who are going to be able to identify what is currently missing, what do we need, and do I have the interest to shift into that and to bring that to the co-op.
Thanks, Amy. Boris, can you say more about point number 2?
Yeah, especially as we've grown, I think it's been really important to, and it's really a subtle difference, is to shift us from what was kind of de facto consensus based decision making, where we are all trying to get to the same preference, to more of consent-based decision making, which is trying to make sure that we're operating within everybody's range of tolerance. And so that really is, you know, on one hand, a subtle shift, but has been kind of critical for us to really stay true to distributed decision making and really empowering everybody in the organization, or at least within, you know, the circle and the domains that it contains, for everybody to have the power to be part of decision making and to be able to, you know, I guess it's done 2 really important things. One is it's created you know, a burden on every person in the decision-making space or inside of the circle in terms of the domains that they cover, to understand what is in their range of tolerance, and to really, you know, to be able to dissent and stop decisions. And this year, you know, we've had a number of decisions stopped from a place of really examining, you know, not what is my preferred outcome, but what's safe enough to try. What is, you know, what's within my range of tolerance. And then it's also forced the group to really understand where everybody else is in terms of what they're able to tolerate and what they consider to be safe enough to try. And so it's really led, I think, to more power for people, but also better decision making, and has allowed us to really move on important decisions in a way that I think a more consensus-based decision making, I think, in the past has really kind of thrown a wrench or really slowed us down. Or we've come across a number of points Lauren shared about some of the examples for hiring. So I think it's been a really important paradigm. And then I think the last thing I'll say about that is it's really required really intentional relationship building inside of the organization. So I think there are formal ways that we are using proposal-based decision making to guide a process that reveals ranges of tolerance, but also a lot of that I think is in informal relationships that are happening in conversations, and so that we're trying to understand each other's perspective and ranges of tolerance through those conversations. And so I think it's been implementing that paradigm and that language has been really helpful to make really big, including fundamental org restructuring decisions. It's laid the groundwork for us to be able to make those together.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add one quick thing, Boris, and that was very thorough, so I don't have to, you didn't leave much for me to add, but I did want to add that our consensus decision-making was exhausting, especially when I was asked to make a decision for work that wasn't very close to me or work that I wasn't a part of. And I think this shift is also recognizing that we're distributing the power to people that are best positioned to make those decisions. And our general circle, and coming from our mission circle, we're essentially giving domain to the people inside of those circles, and we trust them to make those decisions. And so that's, to me, again, it's a relief. It's a relief to not have to be involved in every decision.
Mm-hmm. And I think about like this third point, that something that we've learned the hard way is we're a remote team, and we have been a remote team since well before the pandemic. We have people in Michigan and North Carolina, Virginia, DC, Massachusetts, and Arizona. So we're pretty spread out. And so when we are all together for a staff retreat, the temptation sometimes can be, well, how do we maximize and be most efficient with this time? And we would have these 8-hour grueling days with, like, you can imagine, like the whiteboards and just trying to solve the problems because we're all together and it's going to be easier. And what we realized, and this was a paradigm shift for us too, is like to make the remote work easier, to make the ability to be together virtually and work our time together in person. Well, one, it's just vital to do that. It's vital to find a way to all get together because it's so important for trust. So much is lost on a screen. So like there's so many mannerisms and subtle cues that you just cannot pick up on. And, it's just ample space for miscommunication. And Jerry, I've listened to a talk you gave on nonviolent communication. And that's something that we have talked about too, is just how do we get to know each other's needs and I think that comes out in a lot of informal spaces when you're just spending time together, when you're playing together, so this image here is actually from we have a virtual retreat, a staff retreat, where we just drew what our ideal workplace would look like if we could all be together all the time. And so everyone on the team put that together, and I have a collage of all of them. I should have grabbed that one too. But the last thing I'll say on this is that I think when a lot of us have negative connotations with group work coming out of schools where we're so, drilled to be individual and work alone, and that, we have this phrase, tragedy of the commons. Like you hold things in common, like something's going to fall through the cracks. And I think what, the playfulness and the camaraderie that we have, I'm an improv comedian, and I've led us virtually and in person in improv comedy warm-ups. And it's, how do we transition to the comedy of the commons where we can really hold and be together and comedy is like a moment of like, this seems to contradict, but we're holding that, together. And, and I think in order to do this consent-based work, to trust each other, there is this like element of like, ooh, we don't have to take each other and ourselves so seriously. We can respect each other deeply, but we don't have to, we'll have consent hand signals that are like the awkward turtle, or we object with the iguana. Like
Lauren, no one liked the awkward turtle. It's not going to happen. No one liked it.
Some circles like it. You don't. But yeah, just the third point being, especially when you're together in person, focus on like the culture building and being present. So
and
these
just Lauren, just to affirm that really quickly, I think there's so much that's new, and I think a new paradigm in terms of how you're doing work, but it's also requiring you to rebuild the organization, and I think Sociocracy helps build a good kind of organizational culture, but I think it also, as you're highlighting, works in reverse. Having the right kind of organizational culture that gives good faith and goodwill and extends that to everybody as you're trying things that are new, as you're going to invariably come across things that aren't going to work or feel clunky. What's the foundation that you're leaning on to get through those moments, because they've come and they're going to come again. I think what you're describing, I think it feels like it has been really key to get right, to be able to try some of this stuff.
And Amy and Boris, if you consent to this, I want to end on this slide and then we can open it up for questions. Okay, cool. So these are our learning curves that we discussed yesterday. And I really would love, actually, the group of people assembled, if you have any input for us on, there's 11 of us. And so we may have, when we were starting out, been a little overzealous and we had too many formal circles. And I'm learning in the Sociocracy Academy that that's not uncommon. So we're still learning how to create containers for our work without overburdening staff with too many meetings. Amy, do you want to speak to measuring success and how?
Sure. I mean, I was going to talk about meeting fatigue, since I am in the most circles. And so I think, yeah, that is I'll say this, that we have restructured our circles. We have kind of 2 times during the year, July and January, that we do performance evaluation and preparation. We call it PEP. We like acronyms, they're fun. And essentially it's our time twice a year to reevaluate. We want to be dynamic. We want to be willing to say the things that didn't work and are no longer serving us. And so we did a rehaul, like an overhaul of our circle structure for 2022. We will likely do that again as our team grows and as it becomes more clear, the type of spaces we need to create to hold these bodies of work. And to know that, we don't want to create so many internal spaces that we lose steam or that we lose focus on our external spaces. Because as a member-owned cooperative, our member owners are the reason we exist. We work for them. We work to their benefit. And I would just like to say, one of the mantras we have as a staff is that how we do the work is as important as the work itself. So to us, our internal structure and the workplace that we are creating is as important as our mission. Because if we can't attract, retain, and develop people who come to work for the co-op, we lose them and their expertise and their knowledge, when they leave us for someplace better. So we believe it's in service of our member owners, but also in solidarity with workers. So that's, yeah. And I have a lot of feelings about meetings. I'm really excited. I'm doing the CoLab training, cooperative training course right now. And I saw that Rebecca was in here earlier from CoLab. But one of the things that they recommend is the standard meeting practice. We are experimenting with the standard meeting practice and Ops Tracker tool from CoLab in one of our circle spaces. And so we're going to see if that can help with some of the meeting fatigue, if we're able to make meetings more efficient. So Jerry, good question. Member-owned co-op. Staff are not currently member owners. We are owned by congregations, schools, and nonprofits at the moment. However, staff is very interested in a multi-stakeholder co-op, and we're going through a restructuring as we expand nationally. And yes, we would like to see, we're expecting that there will be different classes in this kind of multi-stakeholder co-op, but that structure is still not defined. But good, thank you for that question. Love that question.
I thought maybe opening it up for questions as well. Yeah, we want to close, if there's time, just to quickly share a quotation. Dr. Gordon Nimhard spoke at our 2021 annual meeting, and she's been a true guide for us and a lot of questions. And we read together Collective Courage, A History of African American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice. And so thinking about, how her, and so this is a quotation from her thoughts on racial equity in co-ops and how to actually live into DEI values instead of just having them written up somewhere. And it really is, she really centers it on the practice of self-management in this quotation. And it's worth reading if I don't mind me closing us out with reading from a slide. Diverse means lots of representation from a variety of people with a variety of statuses, but it's not enough if all those people don't have an equal voice or don't feel comfortable trying to make themselves heard or aren't equally respected. We need more multi-stakeholder solidarity co-ops and more self-management. We must create solidarity systems, be consciously part of the solidarity economy. The US co-op movement is starting to talk about and practice better outreach, being inclusive of histories, leaders, and role models. The US co-op movement is starting to change policies and practices. This makes all of us stronger and builds a sturdier, deeper, and wider co-op movement. So that's what we're hoping to be a part of, and Sociocracy has been huge for us for that.